Okay, so Noi Mauri, Talafalava, and Bulbinaka. Thank you. My name is William, and thank you for joining me this evening. We are evening here in Samoa, where I am, on my presentation of a novel methodological approach to invasive species. And I'm presenting from SPREP, where I'm based. And I will begin by giving a short overview of the problem of invasive species in small island countries and why there's a need to understand the human aspect of the human invasive species relationship. Then I will introduce my research questions, because this project is part of my doctoral studies with the University of Newcastle. So my main focus this evening is to highlight how I will do this in terms of the approach, the Vatalanoa approach that I'm talking about, and how I'm going to be undertaking this within Samoan communities, right? Okay. Right, before I continue, I just want to acknowledge my donor, important funders for this project that I'm a part of, New Zealand Aid, as well as the research partnerships that exist between the University of Newcastle and SPREP, and of course my local stakeholders here, the Government of Samoa, the Ministry of Natural and Environmental Resources here, and as well as the PRISMS mechanism and the Ministry of Women and Social Development. Okay, so when we talk about invasive species, one of the key things we need to understand is that when research on invasive species here in the South Pacific, it's very expensive. One, it's very expensive. The other thing, it's very time consuming. And when you look at the Pacific, we have more than 30,000 islands. And within those 30,000 islands, we have 2.3 million people with many different languages, many different cultures and customs, okay, that are prevalent. And when we take out the work of invasive species when we look at trying to do eradication of invasive species here in the Pacific, we sort of come across a lot of challenges because of the cultural barriers. Some of these invasive species are actually totemic, okay, and have special significant value to the indigenous people of our many islands. And here in the Pacific, it is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots. So it's very important, okay, that our environments here are very fragile, but dealing with people to try to eradicate or try to manage invasive species is a very big problem, okay? And it's not like we haven't done anything here in the Pacific. SPREP with its partners in governments of the 22 island country states and territories, they've actually come together to talk on coming up with sort of strategic guidelines that all the regional countries here in the Pacific can work towards in eradicating species. And SPREP is one of the main implementers or facilitators of the initiatives that are adopted within these different countries around the Pacific. And this all began in 2004. But what we can see is that what the literature is saying, that is invasive species is continuing to grow, and it's continuing to be more expensive every time, approximately 26.8 billion annually to control and manage invasive species. So it's a big thing. And also now with the onslaught of climate change, okay, that price or the price for eradication programs and management is going to increase in the oncoming years, okay? Now here in the Pacific, some of the approaches, when we talk about approaches to invasive species and invasive species management, one of the things that usually comes out is that there is sort of a weak gender inequality and social inclusivity, yeah? So when we talk about invasive species, just have a good look here. In invasive species management, there's a lot of men that are doing the groundwork, okay? And we need to ensure that when we work in the Pacific, when we work with people, especially the communities, okay, there's many various groups that exist here. So we must work with men, with women, with the youth, the elders, right? Those who are also living with disabilities as well, and also minority groups like the LGBTQ. Okay, so there's a greater need to have all these groups input when we talk about invasive species management, so that it's inclusive, it's holistic, and it addresses everyone's point of view. Okay, the other thing is a very strong technocratic approach. Okay, yes, we need the sciences. The science is very important, but also we need to understand the capacities of our people to build it up. Okay, so this is not only the men, but everyone else across the board. There was talk about the top-down approach in the previous session. Yes, a lot of the programs and projects that are here in the Pacific, when you look at invasive species, is very top-down and dictated to us. So really the needs within the grassroots communities, they're not really heard, okay? Or these people here within communities that are part of invasive species projects, they may be present, but in terms of decision-making, okay, it's not really heard from the various groups that are present there. Okay, so there's need to have that space for all these groups to be part of invasive species management. Okay, and then traditional knowledge. There are some practices here in the Pacific which they use to address invasive species that are within their communities. And we need to understand what are some of the practices that people have been doing? Do they contribute to invasive species management, or do they cause the invasive species to run rampant? Okay, I'll give you an example. For some places in the Pacific, they sort of look at rats as a totemic animal. So when you're trying to go into a community to get rid of rats, but the people are actually worshiping rats, or they consider it very sacred, you're going to have a problem. Okay, you're trying to get rid of something which is sacred to the people. So this is where the human dimension is important. You need to have those conversations with people to understand. Okay, they will just only reintroduce it, and then you're going to have another problem again. You're wasting money, wasting time. Okay, so you want to be able to address those issues there. And so when I looked at this project in entirety, I tried to look at different frameworks, what is existing out there that will sort of match the work that I want to do. And I saw this one here, the Social Ecological Systems Framework that Berks, Folk, and Colding used. And I see that this is exactly what I want to do. One is the management practices, okay, that's within the institutions, within the NGOs, the government, the ministries, the policies that are there to address invasive species. And on the other side, you have the local ecosystems, the environment, okay, the local, the large and regional environments that are there. So the practices plus the environment, okay, when you look at the SES framework, that when you look at the SES framework, it looks at how to analyze the resilience or the shocks that people go through to better overcome all these issues. And within this case, it's invasive species, okay? And climate change impact on invasive species is growing, like I said. So you need to understand how these two can work better to address all those issues. Another thing is that this framework here, it's very easily adaptable. It's a conceptual framework that's easily adaptable. It's been used in humanities, in health, in law, in economics as well. So it's very dynamic and complex. And here, three key things that come out from this framework here, when I look at it, you have to put it into context. And within the context over here is the South Pacific Island communities, the people that are there, they're all different. Within invasion sciences, the main mismatch is that they think that all communities are homogeneous, but they are not. They are very different peoples that are within communities. And it's very complex. So you need to understand the context. You need to understand the feedback that's coming from them. And how will that connect to your policies, to your plans, your strategic plans to address issues? So I looked at this framework, I said, that's the one that matches what I want to do, okay? And like I mentioned, the weak representation within the communities, you have all these different groups that are present, those living with disabilities, LGBTQ, the youth, for example, here in Samoa, they make up 85% of they do 85% of the work, okay, and they're the most numerous in the population. However, when it comes to decision making, it's only the chiefs, okay, the elites within the communities that make the decisions. Now, the other thing why I talk about inclusivity is because in the Pacific, right, in Pacific Island communities, there are certain areas where only certain groups of people can go to, can access. There'll be a sacred pond or a sacred part of forest that only women have access to, or men have access to, or youth have access to. So you need to understand that if there is an invasive species in these areas here, we won't get any information if we're only listening to one group, the chief, who are making the decisions. You need to have that roundtable discussion with everybody included, because there may be something that is there in these sacred places that's affecting their livelihoods, okay? So again, that's why invasive species management needs to be inclusive of all these different groups that are present there. So my research questions are, what are the values, the attitudes, the practices that people have towards invasive species, right? And invasive species management within South Pacific communities. The research, the project objectives, there's 4 of them. The first one is to understand the diverse groups that are present, right? How they perceive, value, and interact with invasive species in the environment. The second one is to understand how they perceive, value, and interact with invasive species managers. These are the people that actually come in, right? Stakeholders that come into the community and have a talk with the community on eradicating something. But it's the approaches that they use, the methods that they use to get rid of invasive species that might not be comfortable with community members. They might say, oh, you need to do trapping, or you need to do this. People, hey, no, we don't want to do that. So you need to understand people's perspective from that side. Also, you need to be able to articulate the importance of combining these ideas from the various groups, okay, to better plan for future invasive species management and projects. And overall, one of the main outcomes of this project that I want to do is to develop a Pacific protocols toolkit for invasive species management, so that when they go into the communities, they know, okay, these are the key things that I need to be aware of. Right here in this slide, these are where my project sites are. Here in Samoa, you can see Apolima Island. Okay, this is an island between Savaii and Upolu, and there's not much invasive species management that has been carried out. So it serves as like a control to see, you know. Here in Mota'a, they have an ongoing project on mangroves conservation, and it's closer to the town or the city. So it'll be interesting to see people's perspective of those who are living close to the town area. What are their ideas? What are their perceptions towards invasive species and invasive species management? Here in Wafato, they have an extensive forest area, and it's also one of the primary sites for endangered bird that's here in Samoa. So again, these 3 sites are very different. Also, it'll be interesting to see how, you know, and compare how people's responses are towards invasive species management. Now, the approach that I'm using, Vātalanoa, okay, it's a combination of 2 Pan-Pacific concepts. When you talk about Talanoa, the first one, we are talking about speech, okay? You're talking about building relationships through speech, okay? Tala is to talk, and Noa is about everything and anything. And Pacific Island people, we like to talk about everything and anything. So that concept of Talanoa, okay, you co-creating stories with your participants, or you engaging them on a relationship level, you're engaging them on a psychological level, emotional level, spiritual level as well. And when you talk about Va, okay, Va is actually a space or sacred space, a space between spaces, what people say. And it focuses on the centrality of reciprocal relationships. So the emphasis is on value, in creating a special space, okay, that Pacific Islanders understand what Va is, because it's a sacred space, the bond that you have with another person's sibling, family, friends, strangers, okay? Now, when you combine these two together, Vatalanoa, you are creating a sacred space to engage in sharing or co-creating stories. If you use just Talanoa alone, okay, Talanoa alone can be very gender biased, because Talanoa, there are only certain spaces where only men speak, okay, or women speak. But when you combine the two, you are addressing all, okay, holistically. And if you put in, yeah.
Letting you know, you got about 1 minute to go.
Okay,
William.
almost done. So this is this is sort of the model when you put it there. Okay, it's Vatalanoa is indicated by those blue arrows there. Okay, so it's use of Talanoa in conjunction with the concept of Va. Okay, it's very inclusive for those who are unheard within communities, and it's creating those special spaces within communities, right? And this is what it'll look in a methodological approach, okay, through household surveys, okay? You sit down, you talk with them, okay, as you can see in the pictures here. And for me, I want to also ensure that it's participatory as well, focus group discussions where you have community mapping with the people, they walk out and they be a part. You have a walk and talk, okay, about the environments, hotspot areas where invasive species are, and what are they doing, the activities around to address those issues, okay? Right, and very lastly, okay, after you gather all those information, SPREP already has technical guides, but there's nothing to touch on the social dimension. And that is where my research is coming in to put those protocols in place. So people, when they go in the communities, they know how to address and how to talk and engage and mingle with people. Right, so there's a conclusion. So if you understand, you'll be able to navigate all these cultural and social complexities, avoid conflicts and misconceptions within your communities when you engage them, when you do invasive species management. Thank you. That is all, my conclusion.